Looks like people are joining, so we'd like to get started. Welcome and good afternoon, everyone, to APNM's fourth virtual town hall event on APNM's Humane Education, How We Teach Compassion with Whittaker and other Animal Connection ambassadors. I'm Dorothy Hutchinson. I'm the Chief Development Officer for the organization. Thank you to so many of you who let us know that this is an important topic to you and that you are interested in getting an inside view on how we're teaching compassion for animals through our animal connection curriculum that is delivered to communities and school children during a time when schools are closed due to a pandemic. With me today is Isabel Slater, our APNM's Major Gifts Officer. Isabel will be monitoring the chat throughout today's session. Thanks, Isabel. Also on staff with us today is Elizabeth Wolf. She has rejoined the organization as our new Chief of Program Services. I am very excited to get us started with this event today. All right, from here, I am very excited to introduce you to our wonderful speakers this afternoon. So first, let me introduce you to APNM's Education Director, Sherry Mangault. Sherry joined Animal Protection of New Mexico after a 30-year award-winning career in teaching in Albuquerque. At APNM, she then served 6 years as the cruelty case manager and under Gary King, handled the New Mexico Attorney General's Animal Cruelty Task Force hotline. Her experience as the cruelty manager has brought her to realize that systematic change for animals needed to start with children. Sherry created both animal connection curricula and has been involved with the Humane Education program for more than 10 years. Outside of the classroom, she's a community liaison and evaluator for the Southwest Canine Corps of Volunteers and the board treasurer for Gray 2K USA, which is an international nonprofit that is successfully closing greyhound racing tracks all over the world. Part of Sherry's family are 5 rescued dogs who all serve as registered therapy dogs. And then joining Sherry today is Natalie Martinez. Natalie is an animal lover and a middle school teacher at an alternative middle school in Albuquerque. She has enjoyed working with Sherry in her classroom for the past 3 years and believes in this curriculum because it fuses her love for animals and education with an emphasis on developing compassion for the animals. Natalie has 3 pets of her own, 2 dogs named Radar and Token, and a cat named Kitty. Also with us today is Susan Siebert, also an educator. She came to New Mexico after spending 17 years in Hawaii, where she was the director of the Montessori Community School. In 2000, her very first dog, Rudy, came into her life and changed her world forever. Susan says, "I'm deeply grateful to have discovered APNM. I believe Rudy led me here." And that love for animals is what inspired her to accompany Sherry into the classrooms at Algodones Elementary School, which is near Bernalillo. And in addition, we have another guest, and this is Mike Salo. Mike is a retired naval officer and mail carrier and a member of the Southwest Canine Corps of Volunteers. Through this group, he got connected with Sherry and started bringing his dog Dennis to help teach children about loose dog and bite safety in many New Mexico schools. Mike now has a black lab named Kevin that he's training to be a pet therapy dog as well. And with this and this wonderful group of people, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry, who will get us started and take us through today's presentation. Sherry, you're on.
All right. Thank you so much, Dorothy. Well, how did all of this begin? As Dorothy explained, my first job with Animal Protection of New Mexico was on the animal cruelty hotline, and that grew into also taking the calls from the Attorney General's animal cruelty hotline. And many times after hearing what was happening throughout the state to animals, sometimes there was nothing that I could do. Either the county had no ordinances, or maybe they didn't even have animal control officers or a shelter. So that began to bother me. And after 6 years of it, it dawned on me that maybe we should start concentrating on preventing the problems instead of just taking care of the little fires when they popped up. And because of my teaching background, I honestly believe that students were the place to start. And so I also worked with Bernalillo County and Albuquerque animal control officers to delineate what the problems were and how we could prevent them from occurring. And so that takes us to the very first presentations on the next slide. We began in 2010 with summer programs in the Bernalillo County community centers. And we worked hand in hand with Bernalillo County field officers. And what they said they saw more often than not were animal bite issues, loose dogs and biting dogs. And so that was the first presentation. And to this day, it is still the most popular and asked for presentation. At that time, I had just become connected as a trainer with Southwest Canine Corps of Volunteers. So the therapy dogs that come from that organization became the icing on the cake. And we could bring them into the community centers and not just talk about what our behavior should be around animals, but we could demonstrate it. And then with the therapy dogs present, the children could practice what we preached. At that point, within 1 year, we started getting calls from schools. And the very first school was Valencia Elementary. And there was a 3rd grade teacher there who was an animal advocate and somehow heard about what we were doing in the community centers and asked us to come to her school. And so we did. And that took us to a 3rd grade class. And we had 6 presentations, 6 topics that we had come up with. And we brought them to the 3rd grade class. We were not there more than 1 week when other 3rd grade teachers asked if they could also join in. And it was soon after that that the 1st grade teachers asked if we could do something for their classes. And so it grew. And now on the next slide, you'll see how much it's grown. The Animal Connection program is a 12-week program, 1 hour a week in the classroom with the students. It can be adapted for grades 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and also for adults. The other program we have is a 4-week program, 1 hour a week, with students who are in kindergarten through 2nd grade. Any of the lessons, and we'll go through what those lessons are, but any of the lessons can stand alone. But when they are together, they sort of grow from kind of fun and interesting to very serious topics. The counties and pueblos that the programs have run in are listed on this slide as well. And I do want to admit that I have great help with this. I'm not the only teacher in the program. I have Lindy Martinez, who is the lead teacher in the northern schools in which the programs run. And I have Cindy Wasick, who is the lead teacher in some of the Albuquerque schools, as well as those south of Albuquerque. And then after 10 to 11 years of success in the classroom, COVID hit. And in March of 2020, we were interrupted in the middle of our second semester classes and hit with no schools, no children in the schools. So after complaining and whining, we decided what we could do is, with permission from donors, transfer some of the funds sponsoring these programs and make lessons into virtual lessons that could be shared through the computer with students. The highlight of this was the lemons became lemonade, in that now that we have several of these lessons prepared in video format, we can go into every school in New Mexico, whereas before geography was a problem. We literally couldn't get to all of the schools. And so in a sense, this has become a real caveat to the program. So we have 7 of our videos done, and we need funding for 3 remaining ones. And so we'll go to the first lesson in the next slide. Okay, this is the introduction to the program, and we do have a video for this already made. But even before the students begin the program or even know that there's going to be a program about animals coming into their classroom, we ask them to draw 2 pictures, one of something good they've seen happen with an animal, and one of something bad that bothered them when they saw it happening to an animal. And you're seeing on your screen 2 examples of this. The one on the far right is a good picture. It shows someone rescuing a cat from the tree. The one in the middle was shocking to us because the accuracy of this drawing by a 4th grader let us know that he had been to a dog fight. So, the drawings that we get from the students often help us gear special lessons and special emphasis on lessons to the exact problems that the children are experiencing in their communities. A suggested assignment that runs for the students throughout the 12-week program involves what you see on the left side of your screen, which is just an example of one of the templates that we have made. The templates or charts are made for all different kinds of animals that could become companion animals, everything from a goldfish to a horse or a parrot, let alone dogs and cats and hamsters. The students are asked to fill out the chart, which asks them to look up things and research things such as, what does it cost to adopt a dog? What does it cost to feed a horse a year? What is it that you feed a horse? Whatever animal that they chose. After their chart is filled out, they will have enough information for a 5-paragraph essay in which they introduce the animal. And in the 3 body paragraphs, they can talk about or explain the financial responsibilities of having the animal, the care responsibilities of having the animal, and the ordinances and permits necessary to have that animal in their community. In the final paragraph, they then make the decision based on their research as to whether or not that animal is a wise choice for their family at this time. The paper then, as the program goes on, grows into a presentation to their classmates. And towards the end of this PowerPoint slides, we will show you some of the students doing their presentations. Okay? The next, and as you can see, that particular lesson has already been filmed. Care and responsibility has also been filmed. If you look down at the bottom of the right-hand corner, we're going to list what we were able to make films for, and then we'll also show you the ones that we have yet to do. Care and responsibility is an interactive one for the children, because once again, we do teach them the daily needs of the animals, the weekly and monthly needs, as well as the annual needs, like trips for vaccinations, trips to the veterinarian. In this class, as you can see, we do bring in registered therapy dogs, and so they don't just learn about it, they get to experience some of the things they need to do for their animals. And this one has also been filmed. I think one of the highlights of this one is a realization we bring the students to. We create a timeline for them. And on the timeline, we list several different kinds of animals and what their average lifespan is. And then we start them off. Let's say they're 10 years old and they're telling us that they want a small dog. Well, a small dog can typically live to be 15 years old. So we start asking them, what is going to happen in your life between your age now of 10 and when you get that dog at the age of 10 and he lives for 15 years? You're going to be 25 years old. Are you still going to have an interest in the animal, the financial ability, the time for that animal? It's a real eye-opener for them. The third lesson, which is on the next slide, is life and death in the shelter. And in order to do this one, we rode along with animal control officers for several days and photographed the types of things that they were taking care of, and turned it into a virtual day with an animal welfare officer. This would be a field officer. In this presentation, we follow one particular dog who happens to be the white one that you see in two of those pictures. He's picked up off the street. He's checked for tags. He's checked for a microchip. We bring in a scanner. We have therapy dogs present for this lesson, and we scan them and show the students how the scanner works and what information can be gained in order to help get the animal back to his home through the use of microchips. The animal control officer uses all kinds of equipment to help him capture animals that are loose, and that is demonstrated in this particular film. We also take the animal through the process of entering into the shelter. We talk about how long shelters can keep an animal, and that, of course, depends on the number of animals they're receiving and whether or not it becomes overcrowded. We talk about the adoption process. We talk about vaccinations and spaying and neutering that is done for the animal when he enters and doesn't have an owner that we can find. And then, unfortunately, we have to talk about the reality of what happens when the shelter becomes overcrowded. And that is what you see on the right-hand side of the screen. Excuse me. The dogs are brought in to the euthanasia suite, and they're kept in the cages that you see. And then we literally describe to the students how euthanasia is done in a government-sponsored shelter. And believe it or not, it seems to bring a sense of calmness to the students, because many of them have had their animals put down and they didn't know how it was done. And in New Mexico, the law requires it to be done in a humane way. And the last thing that the dog or cat experiences is kindness. And that one, as you can see, has also been filmed. We follow this up, with the next slide, which shows the animal welfare offers coming into the classroom, wherever we are, whoever covers that particular school or that district, we ask those officers to come in and speak with the children. They're wonderful because they follow up and accentuate some of the things we've already taught, like the need for microchipping, the need for spaying and neutering, and they emphasize these things. The students also get to go out to their van, which is what you see in the right-hand photograph, and the animal control officers, excuse me, demonstrate how their equipment works. And at this point, I would like to turn the presentation over to Natalie Martinez, who is, as you can see from the information on this screen, one of the teachers who has had the program in her classroom. So Natalie, if you would explain a little bit about your special circumstances and your students.
Sure. Excuse me. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting this great webinar this afternoon so we can discuss how great this program is. I've been working with Sherry for about 3 years. I do work at an alternative school with a challenging population where we are in need of compassionate education. And I had heard a while back, well, how do you teach compassion? And when you start thinking about that, that's a really tough one to explicitly teach. And so with Sherry bringing in the animals, I have seen compassion in children just from petting the animals. I have seen healing from learning about these different topics. And it has been a great addition to our program. I think that this program should be part of all child's upbringings, because what we learn is that nobody explicitly teaches these things to children. It's things that we learn as we grow and our circumstances we're in. So this education program really helps students learn about how to care for animals, how to report things that are not going well for animals, as well as many other things. And so I'm very grateful that Sherry is able to run the program in our school. Our students look forward to it every week. When are the dogs coming? When are the dogs coming? And we had one student actually who requested a certain dog every time. She really had a bond with this dog of Sherry's named Arizo. And she would lay on the floor with this dog and pet it, and they just developed this amazing bond. And this student, you know, was generally pretty emotionless, but when this dog came in, she would just light up, and it was just amazing experience. Each lesson in itself has practical ways on how we can be compassionate towards animals and how we can help them and how we can care for them. So I'm really appreciative, Sherry, that you have brought this program to our school. And I really hope that it can be expanded to basically every child, because it's so beneficial to learn these things as you're growing up.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Natalie is an incredible teacher. She deals with very difficult children who have come out of very difficult situations. And they are mid-schoolers, which is a difficult age to begin with. So thank you so much, Natalie. The next lesson in the series is the need for spaying and neutering. And I don't know if you can kind of see from the process through these lessons that we start off slightly lighthearted and caring and responsibility. And then we start to get into the things that students, adults really need to realize. And that is the need for spaying and neutering. They've already seen the shelter. They've already heard about euthanasia and how that has to happen if the shelter becomes too crowded and there's no one adopting the animals. So spaying and neutering becomes extremely necessary. We begin this lesson with an activity, and the students think we're nuts. They have no idea why we're doing this. And what we do is bring in a big bag full of stuffed dogs and cats. And then we get the classroom trash can. And we time this to last 3 minutes. And every student in the room is given one of these animals. And every 8 seconds, when I say the word now, a student is to toss that dog or cat into the trash can. And we do that for a straight 3 minutes. And they giggle at first, and then they quiet down, and they're all wondering what the heck they're up to. It becomes very sobering when at the end of that 3 minute period, we explain that in the United States, every 8 seconds, a dog or a cat has to be euthanized because a shelter is overcrowded. That means that within that 3-minute period, approximately 24 animals were euthanized. With that activity, the students seem to become aware. And then we show them what you see in this chart. We have them mathematically extrapolate the numbers. What will happen if you start off with 2 cats, a female and a male, neither one fixed? They would have an average of 7 in their litter. And if those 7 are not fixed, within 6 months, you can have 49. And so we have them extrapolate that number all the way out for an entire year. And I think the reality begins to set in. We also teach the surgeries that take place, the surgeries themselves, what is done, and the aftercare that they, as the animal's family, will be expected to provide. This is also a lesson we have been able to film. The next lesson that follows is quite the fun one for all of them, but it does deal with a very serious problem, and that is how to prevent dog bites and what to do when you run into a loose dog that you don't know. This is our most popular lesson and the one that we began with at the very beginning. We begin with what our behavior should be like around our own animals to keep them calm and happy. And then we talk about what to do if they run into a dog or animal that they don't know, how to tell from that animal's behavior if he is going to be friendly or if it's one they need to be very cautious about. So they're reading animal behavior. We then go into what to do if they come across a loose dog, and then, most importantly, how to protect themselves if they're under attack by a biting dog or a pack of dogs. In this case, we always have therapy dogs present for the presentation, and the children practice what they have learned with the therapy dogs. But when it comes time for the vicious dog, we use the marionette that you see in that middle picture. And he literally goes around the room attacking students. And we watch to see that they are doing the proper things to protect themselves from a dog that is attacking. On the far left, for those of you who can see it, there is an elderly security guard from one of the schools in Las Vegas where we do these lessons. And the cutest thing happened when he came into the classroom in the middle of the lesson and walked up and said, oh, I'd like to pet the dog, and then reached out with his hand, as you see him doing in that photograph. And that is what we just taught the children not to do, because a hand coming towards the dog's face can be seen as a threat by the dog. So the cute thing that happened was several of the children jumped up and said, oh, Mr. Jaramillo, no, don't do it that way. And then they came up to the front and showed him how to pet that dog. I'd like you to know more about the part that the therapy dogs play in the classroom. So our next guest speaker is Mike Salo, who is an 8-year member of the organization that we draw the registered therapy dogs from. And these are pictures of Mike with his black lab, Dennis. Mike, can you talk a little bit about what you've done?
Sure. Thank you, Sherry. And I would like to thank APNM and Sherry for inviting me to be a part of this webinar. And I want to let everyone know that I really believe in this program, and especially with the bite safety and loose dog portion of it. And that's not only because the kids need to learn how to approach dogs and be around dogs, but it's also for the dog's safety. I mean, I'm sure there's been numerous dogs put down because they bit a child because the child approached them in an incorrect manner. So it's great to start teaching these kids when they're younger and hopefully save some dogs' lives and save a lot of pain for children too. My dog Dennis and I had so many wonderful visits with the different schools in the Albuquerque and Santa Fe area. And one of the things early on when I started doing doing this is I thought, well, gee, I'll get some fruits and vegetables for Dennis to for his treats. And it was just such a pleasure to see the smiles on these kids' faces when I would bring out his carrots or his pineapple or his apple. And they, I just thought maybe this would be a good idea for them too. So I incorporated that into my lessons. And the kids were just so enthusiastic when they would walk into the class or we'd walk into the class. And they would see that the dogs were there for the day. And I can't tell you how many times that they would rather be turning around, looking at Dennis and I, rather than paying to the lesson. But, we got that under control pretty easily. But it was always a fun experience for them. And one of the neat things was I can remember when we would be through with our little group of children, they'd go on to another dog. But then as soon as they finished with the other dog, they'd always want to come back and see Dennis and give him his carrots. So it was just wonderful to do. Dennis and I have also participated in the Read to the Dogs program, where it was it was great for the kids because we'd help them get through the reading and everything. And it was good for Dennis because he'd be asleep probably within a couple minutes after the kids started reading to him. But it was just a fun experience to have them petting him and being around him. There's a couple of sad things I just kind of wanted to bring up here too. In a rural area of New Mexico, we went to a school there, and this little boy came up to me. He's probably a first or second grader, and was talking to me about Dennis. He said, "Oh, I used to have a dog just like Dennis." I said, "Oh, really? What happened to him?" He said, "Well, my dad shot him." And I didn't pursue why the dad shot him. And then a little bit later in that same lesson, he told me that there was a woman that would shoot loose dogs when they would come close to her property, which I thought was pretty tragic. So the other thing about this program, I think, is it maybe shows these children that about the compassion for animals and the compassion for dogs and cats, and how important it is to kind of consider them as part of the family, just not something you can toss away. And but anyway, I've enjoyed thoroughly being part of this program and bringing my therapy dog from SCCB to participate in the classrooms. And I have another one who is in training now, kind of, but I don't know how long it's going to take him to get through that. He's a little bit of a rambunctious Labrador. Dennis was a great, calm Labrador and did wonderful in the schools. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for all of your trips to the classrooms, as well as for joining us today. Dennis is an incredible animal. He just is. Well, the lessons turn more serious now, and we talk about the consequences of chaining. That's lesson number 7. It's a huge problem in New Mexico, and it's one of the most dangerous things that can happen to an animal, to be tethered or chained 24/7. And it is also, believe it or not, one of the most dangerous things that can happen for the people who enter into the space of that animal. Most dog bites in New Mexico occur to children who have entered into the little space, the little circumference of a dog that has been chained. And when you look at the size of the child in this one picture with the black and white dog, you can see what's very typical. This is a very lucky child, but what's very typical is little ones tend to reach for the face of the dog. And once again, when a dog sees that hand coming towards them and he becomes protective of his space, he's going to bite. And he can bite the hand, or he's also typically at the level where he can bite the face. And that is where most dog bites occur, with children's hands or faces. And then, of course, who gets in trouble? The dog, the child, not the people responsible for chaining that dog, and not the people responsible for watching after that child. Problems for the dog can be seen in the picture on the left. The dogs are put out in the backyard, chained up 24/7, not neglected, and the chains and their collars can literally become embedded around their necks. And you see an example of that in the chain next to that picture. This is a very serious problem in New Mexico. This is one of the lessons that we have not been able to film yet, and hope to be able to, because it is so common. The next lesson is one that we never expected that we would do. The topic had come up to us, but it was never one of our first 6, because we didn't want, we didn't think it had to come up with children. But the drawing that we showed you at the beginning of this presentation and the drawing that you see on the left showed us that children 3rd, 4th, 5th grade had been to dog fights, derbies, and they also, with the chaining lesson, realized the anger and aggression that can develop in a dog who is chained 24/7. And that's what you see in the picture of that pit bull. The little stick figures up above are people, children mostly, and the caption is, "Don't go near that dog." And so they have seen and learned what happens with chaining and with dog fighting. We begin this lesson with the history of blood sports. It actually dates back to ancient Rome. The photograph or the illustration we're using here is literally Shakespeare's theater, which hosted dog fights during Shakespeare's lifetime. The topic covers both cockfighting and dog fighting, because it is so common in this state, and I hate to say that. I have one real quick anecdote that I want to share about chaining and blood sports. We were doing 3 5th grade classes at an elementary school here in Albuquerque. And after the chaining presentation, the students came up to me and said, "Well, what are you going to do about the dog across the street from the playground?" And I said, "Well, what about the dog?" So we went outside, and there are 2 pit bulls in a fenced-in yard, both of the pit bulls chained. Well, they called me on it. So pulled out my cell phone and I called animal control and reported it, and then went on to the other classes. The next week when I came back, the children were so excited. They came running up, just bursting out of the classroom and said, "Oh, Miss Sherry, animal control came and they took those 2 pit bulls off the chain. And then a bunch of animal control vehicles came and the police came and the man was handcuffed and taken away. And then all of these chickens were carried out of the yard and put into the animal control vans." And I thought, good heavens, the 2 dogs were guard dogs expected to bark because he was operating a cockfighting ring in his backyard, and those kids had turned him in. They were so pleased with themselves. Okay, the next slide is on our presentation on the link. So you can really tell once we get into blood sports and the link that we're dealing with heavy, heavy topics. The link is the connection between those who would deliberately harm an animal and those who would go on to harm people. This is a very tricky one for us to do because many of the children, I don't want to say many, some of the children in the classes that we teach are in a domestic violence situation. They're experiencing that in their own home. So this also lesson provides things, places, people they can call, including APNM, to help report the issue. And for those who are afraid to leave their home for fear of what would happen to their animal, Animal Protection has a program, the CARE program, in which we can take in we have safe havens for the animals so that the people feel comfortable leaving the situation. The 10th one, the next class, is a fun-loving one. We are so grateful for the lady who created this farm sanctuary. This is Sherpa's Farm, and it's up in northern New Mexico. And a lot of our classes are in rural schools, and a lot of the schools in the Albuquerque area are fairly rural too. And so the fact that families can have goats and might have a horse or donkeys and things is very real in New Mexico. So in this particular film, which has been completed, the creator of Sherpa's Farm introduces the students in the film to some of her animals and their background stories. And then in the second part of the film, her ranch manager takes the children through a typical day caring for these animals. And this is one of another one of our most popular lessons. The children that you see in this photograph are very lucky. They attend a school that is close to where Sherpa's Farm is located. And the guardian of these animals always sponsors a field trip for them to come up and meet the animals that they've only seen on the film. The next thing that happens is it's time for the students to do their presentations. And this comes from that assignment I explained at the beginning. As you can see from the two bottom photos, they have collected all the information on their animal and they're going to present it to their class. And so most of the time it's posters or brochures. Some kids have done skits, but with 4th, 5th, 6th grade, they are ready to learn how to do PowerPoint presentations as well as videos. And so you see it in the top two pictures, one of the groups teaching the audience that you see to their right. And that is how big some of the audiences are that these children play to. It's absolutely amazing. And then very quickly, the next slide takes us to our Animal Connection Junior program. That's the K through 2nd grade. And the topics that we cover are on the left. They're covered in a way that is appropriate to this age group. The left-hand picture is Lindy Martinez, our lead teacher up in the Santa Fe area, and that is how she's greeted by her students every week when she comes in. The wonderful caretaker of the livestock at Sherpa's Farm has also donated to us one of the 2-scale Breyer Farms and Ranch sets, which you see in the upper right. And for the little ones, we do have a presentation on farm animals where we've incorporated and created games that the children can play with livestock animals as they play with that particular set. The picture in the middle is another dear one to me. At this particular school, the children always wanted to say goodbye to the therapy dogs before they left. So the dogs walked around the classroom and got petted goodbye. In this particular class, every child wanted to kiss the dog on their head. This is Rico. He went around the room and was kissed until he reached this student, who was the last student in the class. And he pulled out that tissue and started wiping Rico's head. And I said, "Oh, that's probably very smart. You're concerned about germs." And his response to me was, "Oh no, Miss Sherry, I just want Rico to know which kiss is mine." And that is the type of behavior and engagement that we get from the students. The next slide will introduce us to Susan Siebert, who is a member of Sophia's Giving Circle, a wonderful group of people who sponsor Algodones Elementary, which is just north of Bernalillo. Susan?
Hi there, everybody. And Sherry, I'm just delighted to be here with you, I have to say. And for me, having viewed 12 of the lessons from beginning to end, the most impacting part of it for me is that concept of compassion, which you've heard others referring to already today. And I want to talk to you about how I saw compassion evolving with this one group of third graders that I got to watch. It started the very first day that she came in, and naturally, if anybody comes in a classroom with a dog, you have their attention. So she did come in, but instantly, what I saw happening was that she, Sherry, and I know your other staff are trained the same, she was a role model of compassion. And it started with how she was treating the dog that she had brought with dignity and respect. And then how she spoke to the children that were gathered around, a class full of third graders, and the kind of respect she showed to them as well as to the animals. I thought, this is a role model of compassion right here, starting day one. And what's interesting was in that same experience, I got the feeling that the dogs themselves, because there were dogs in future lessons, but that very first day, the dog showed compassion. The dog was the role model because somehow what got communicated to the children was the feelings of the animal being in a strange situation, a new situation, and how much these feelings related to them, feelings they could identify with. And here were these dogs being brave and kind and appealing to the children. But I would say maybe the biggest role model of compassion was the children themselves. Because from the very beginning, Sherry had an experience for the children to safely and successfully approach a strange dog. And every child in the classroom got to watch one of their peers go up and greet and love, really, another living being. And I thought that was so powerful and continued through the 12 weeks. And the final thing that really impacted me was a day that I came in early and the children from all the classes were lining up coming in from lunch and recess. And they saw Miss Sherry coming in with her dogs. There were several. Of course, they were so excited. You would expect that. But what was remarkable to me was what balanced that excitement was their respect for those dogs. They were not going to overwhelm them, a whole school of them in a big hallway with their excitement. They were just gentle in their presence. And I was further blown away that all these children knew the names of each and every dog. And only one class had the experience of the program, but I saw that the whole school was impacted. And it is my wish to this day that every school in New Mexico could give every child that very same experience, because it's incredible.
Thank you so much, Susan, and it was wonderful having you in all of those classes. I think we need to really hurry now. This slide simply depicts that we're not just in schools. And as you can see from this list, we are all over the place with the types of venues and audiences that we can work with on these lessons. I will mention that the Central New Mexico Correctional Facility is an extremely different experience. They receive the entire 12-week adult version, the inmates there in level 2. And they also are bringing in dogs from the Valencia County shelter, and we're helping them obedience train those dogs. And so far, over 70 dogs from that overcrowded shelter have been adopted out because of this program. It's a very, very important one. And now, Dorothy, I think it may be time to turn things over to you with the little bit of time that we have left.
Of course. I would like to hand it over to Isabel, and Isabel is going to read out some questions that we have received, and hopefully you and the other panelists are able to answer. And then I'll come back in for the final words. Isabel, would you like to go ahead?
Sure thing. And just as a reminder to anyone who has not submitted a question, you can still do so with that Q&A button down on the right-hand side. So the first question that I have here is, are the actual spay and neuter surgeries shown in the video lesson?
You gonna give that one to me?
Whoever would like to take it, but Sherry, I think you're the most appropriate.
No, although we did have a camera in a surgical suite, and we showed the prep of the dog, and we showed from a distance the extreme care that the veterinarian and her vet tech took when they did the surgery. And we also showed so from a distance, the children could not actually see what was happening, but they did see the dog carried out and placed in a kennel, and they saw the dog in the film being able to leave on his own 4 paws as when his own guardians came to pick him up.
The next question, is this program in our public schools or in after-school programs or both? And Sherry, I think you're also the appropriate person to answer this one, but anyone else feel free to jump in.
Sure. We are in both. We do after-school programs. The schools that we typically are in when we do the live presentations are in financially strapped neighborhoods, or the schools have low academic ratings within the state. And so those particular schools are targeted, and the program is absolutely free for them. We have requests, though, to do after-school programs as well. And so far, the only thing that limits us is a budget, because we have 3 teachers.
So the next question is specifically addressed to you, Sherry. Are the lessons plans in Sherry's program available for others to share view?
Are these lesson plans available for others to share and view? They are going to be. We are in the process of putting the lessons up on a virtual learning platform, and we are having to change the suggested activities and for the teachers, the pre-activities and post-activities for the lessons to fit the virtual format, since the kids are not in the classroom right now with the teachers. However, the wonderful thing is, if a school is within our driving area and we have the funding, we can bring the school live, we can bring the lessons live to the schools. But once we have these virtual lessons, these filmed lessons, they're going to be available for every student in every school of the state, and that will be free of charge. So that's how we made lemonade out of those lemons.
The next question, hi Sherry, do you know why the cow at Sherpa Sanctuary has a ring in the nose?
I've asked that very question. It looks so scary. I don't even remember how much Ione weighs. That's Ione, but Ione is a very large animal. And when she came to the sanctuary, she already had that in her nose. And I believe it's one way that they can use to handle the animal when they're that size. I didn't ever see it used or a lead placed in that brass ring when I was there, because they had her haltered and led her around as you would a horse. But that's what it was originally for by the owner who gave her up.
Heidi asks, how much does it cost to fund a lesson? And I'm not sure whether that's, a full lesson or whether that's one of the, just one-offs that you do. But Sherry, maybe you'd like to speak to that a bit.
Sure. Hi, Heidi. It depends on the lesson, and it depends geographically where the school is. The further out we have to go, then we have mileage that, that we're concerned with. But the actual cost to fund a lesson can be as little as $300 or as much as $1,000. But if we're going to film it and we bring in a professional videographer to do that, he's just been incredible with the films that he's made, then it gets pretty expensive. It's about $5,000 to $5,500 to film these lessons. And that's why we got as far as we did. And we still have 3 more that we're working towards.
All right. Well, the next question is from David, and he starts off by saying many thanks to APNM and APVNM. So thanks to you, David, for all you do. I'm going to try and summarize a bit. The first question here is, are you providing animal education to the Pueblo communities? And I believe he references specifically Cochiti. So I wonder if you want to speak to that, Sherry.
Yes, in that one slide, we had a list of the pueblos where these programs have played before. And in some cases, it may just be 1 or 2 presentations in a summer program for the children. But I see we're going back to that. There we go. And then Cochiti is one that we have been at in the past, and we did, as I remember, 2 5th grade classes there for them. But that was 2 or 3 years ago. Well, probably 3 or 4 years ago. But we love working with the Pueblos. We absolutely love it. And we often, if we don't have time during the school year to fulfill all the requests, we will go back in the summer, especially to the Pueblos, because they have wonderful programs for children through their community centers.
Okay, and the second part of this question is asking whether or not we include a short description of APNM's key educational topics, and I think information about our other programs like CARE and the Straw Fund in any of those educational endeavors.
That's a good question. And the answer is yes. If it pertains to the lesson, we will definitely mention it. And the one that I know I referenced when I was talking earlier was the CARE program. Once we do the presentation on the link, we literally hand out brochures for the children, and we leave with the teacher on how to access help for their animal if they're in that situation. And those brochures also explain what the victim needs to do to protect himself or herself, get out of the situation, and how the animals can be taken care of. And yes, we do talk about the Straw Fund and everything else that APNM offers.
The next question is from Colleen. She says, how do you incorporate education filtering down to the parents of the kids in your class? So perhaps I'm misinterpreting this, Colleen, and I apologize if so, but I think that's asking how, if there's education that goes on with the parents as well as with the students.
Well, amazingly enough, those kids take a lot of this home. For example, when we do the spay and neuter, the necessity for spay and neuter, I cannot tell you how many parents then call either me or the teacher and ask, where can we get our animals spayed and neutered at a discounted rate? And sure enough, we have that on the APNM website for every single county in there goes the dog, every single county in New Mexico where they can obtain. And we've had parents do that, and we've had children come back a month later into one of the classes, and one little girl I remember said, "Oh, we spayed and neutered all 6 of our pets." And I just thought, oh. So yes, it does get home to the parents.
Thank you. How
That's a
important
wonderful
is it?
therapy dog talking to you.
How important is it to be real, live people and dogs in the classroom?
I think it's incredibly important. It's the personal touch. And I'd like to take all the credit, but no, it's the dogs. The dogs engage their attention, and they know they're going to get to handle the dogs and practice what they're learning. And one thing I'd like to add here that just really shocked me in the opening years of this program is we always have evaluations for the students and ask them what they think. What they thought about the program and what they think of the therapy dogs. And I constantly keep thinking, we're going to hear, oh, they were wonderful. We got to play with them. And they did all of these tricks for us. And it was so much fun. That's not what we hear. What we hear in the schools that we're in is typically they were so clean and you could pet them. And that was just an eye-opener for what's going on in their neighborhoods.
Next question is about dog chaining. It's specific to Arizona, so I know that's a little bit out of the scope of what we deal with. But the question is, how do you address something like dog chaining in tribal housing ordinances that require residents to chain their dogs?
Well, one of the things that Animal Protection of New Mexico offers through one of our staff members is fencing. If we can get a donor to help us with the costs of fencing, we have built fences on people's property to take away the fact that the only way they could contain their dog was through chaining. And one of the things I would suggest in a case like that is working with the tribal council and seeing if they would be willing to allow those kinds of fences to be built, even if it is just a kennel run. And then you approach the local high school and the vocational school, and you can have students build those fences with the supplies hopefully donated through a donor.
Next question, I think Natalie might have some input on too. Are the school principals the individuals that need to be approached to get schools to adopt the video lesson?
I know that that's originally how they got, I'm sorry. I know that's how Sherry originally got into our program. Sherry, can you talk about how you got with Adele on that?
Sure. We can get into schools most easily through a teacher making that request, as long as it has been approved by the principal. But in Natalie's situation, the principal of that particular school was also the principal of the school that runs at the Bernalillo County Juvenile Detention Center. And we had the program running there, and they were so pleased with the way the teenagers in that particular program were responding and the kind of conversations that were going on in the pods in the evening. There wasn't so much talk about what they'd done that put them there, but hey, did you see that dog run today? How fast that dog was? And I miss my dog. And the compassion began to show. And they were so pleased with that the principal of that particular school thought it might be great for the Vision Quest schools, which are dealing with junior high students who unfortunately could be on their way to becoming delinquents if it wasn't if it wasn't taken care of as soon as possible. So the answer to that, the quick answer is yes, you can access it through the principal or through a teacher.
Jacqueline asks if we need volunteers to help with any aspects of our program.
That's another good question. The dogs are all, we'd love to have people come in with their dogs, but the dogs have got to be registered therapy dogs, which are trained to work with students, and they're in hospitals, they're in nursing homes, and they also work with the students. So as far as the dogs are concerned, they have to be registered in order to come into a classroom. The teachers are, two of us are retired teachers, and the third one was a teaching assistant in Denver. So there are some credentials there. So I think, and I hate to say this, but I think it would be hard to bring in, it's dinner time here. It would be hard to bring a volunteer into the classroom for us at this time because of the hoops that we all have to go through in order to be there ourselves.
And I think the last question is from Cheryl. She asks, is living your entire life in a small kennel or for a dog, does that result in similar aggression issues as chaining?
Boy, an entire life in a crate? Absolutely, because that crate becomes their territory. And that is another way we see children in New Mexico being bitten, is that if that crate door is left open and they crawl towards the animal is going to protect his territory. So never chained and never in a kennel for the majority of the dog's time. Just not the thing to do.
Wonderful. Well, that is all of the questions. So thank you so much to everyone.
Okay, well, thank you so much to all of you for participating and for raising such great questions. We really enjoyed listening to you, Sherry, Susan, Natalie, and Mike. This was such valuable and interesting information you provided with us today. And for those of you who are interested, if this is being recorded, yes, it is. And we will make the recording available to anyone who registered for this virtual town hall afterwards within a few days. So thank you everyone for taking the time to be here with us today, and have a wonderful evening.